Hi, my name is Amith Prabhu. We are here at ComSpeak, a talk show that brings a communicator each week who will share with us their experiences in a career they have spent several years in. The idea behind this ComSpeak is to inspire a younger generation of communicators to embrace the field of public relations and corporate communications, and also to learn from what people back in the day did when things were very different from that they are now. Today we have with us Paroma Roy Chowdhury. Paroma reads Asia Communications at Softbank Group. She's a veteran communicator who has spent close to 3 decades both in journalism, public relations, public policy, and communications. Welcome, Paroma, to the ComSpeak show.
Thanks for having me.
So, Paroma, you started back in the day in journalism in the early 90s. You worked in print, and you also told me you had a stint in television as well. Tell us how that came about. What led you to getting into journalism?
Like everything in my life, it's serendipitous. I started writing for pocket money and doing anchoring for Doordarshan while I was still in college. So I had good grades. So I always thought I would go into academics or write the IAS exams, the two standard things the humanities students did those days. But I started enjoying the process of writing. I spent a year in Calcutta on the desk. Then I went to Bombay. In the meantime, I had gotten married also. So I moved to Bombay when my husband went to Bombay. And then I did reporting for about a year. And I had my son. I had him really early 20s. And the only decision which I regretfully did was to switch to features. Because with a new baby, pretty much no infrastructure, very lousy pay, there was no way I could continue in news, which I wanted to. But I would say that Business Standard was fantastic as the first job.
Right.
And then it was another round of serendipity. I got a call from McKinsey.
Okay.
I mean, totally out of the blue, saying
Right.
that we've heard about you and we are interviewing for ISB founding team, Indian
Okay.
School of Business. And everybody knew about Indian School of
Yes.
Business in 2000. And when they were just setting up, 2001,
Right.
this was. And would you come and interview? So I remember having bought an outfit in CP and wearing it and going because I was so badly dressed. And then I got interviewed by a McKinsey team, including a partner. And I heard that Sumantra Ghoshal, who was the founding dean and from London Business School,
Right.
who's unfortunately now no more,
Right.
I had interviewed him from ET and he somehow remembered me. And he said, just go find this girl. I really liked her. Ask her what you would like to do. And that was my genesis
I
of,
see.
joining ISB. And they tell, what do you want to do? Like, you can do admissions, you can do career services, you can become a dean of students. I liked career services because it meant selling the school to corporates. And
Right.
I used to write on management and HR, so I had some background.
So,
And I left everyone. I left my husband, my son who was 8, and moved to Hyderabad.
wow.
Best year of my life. So, that's why I say my life
Right.
is serendipitous. And I came to Delhi, I interviewed with Pramod in his fancy farmhouse. And he had a huge reputation. I also have the fortune of inheriting very, very difficult bosses.
Right.
So Pramod had a reputation of being a very difficult boss who was fully justified, but I knew nothing. I had no corporate background.
Right.
So he told me, asked me a bunch of stuff, and I was very caring. And then he said, why do you want to leave? You've just been there 1 year. I said, I don't want to leave. You called me, that's why I came.
Wow.
But anyway, net,
Right.
I got hired. And it was Delhi. It was doubling my salary. And it looked like a very interesting job on paper. It was essentially doing executive comms
Right.
and internal comms.
Right.
And internal comms in GE is very strategic. It is far more important than PR
I'm sure.
there.
Right.
GE worldwide doesn't talk to too many people.
Yes.
I never did. And those 4 years were amongst the most difficult of my life, but also the most challenging. I directly worked with Pramod, who is one of the most difficult people you can think of.
Okay.
But I learned so much in those 4 years
Right.
that, I don't think I would have learned with any other bosses.
You're telling us your career journey. Twice you mentioned that Mr. Sumantra Ghoshal and then Mr. Tyagarajan found you to be smart with a couple of meetings. What goes into making someone like you smart? What is it that helps ordinary men and women become smarter than they are, that people like those want to have you on their team.
If you are good at what you do, if you really try and be good at what you do, you build credibility.
So how do the current generation of people watching the show decide to do things that make them good at what they do? So what are the 2 or 3 things that go into making someone better than what they are?
Really put your best foot forward. I mean, do whatever little that you do. This is also my GE training. Whether you are organizing a dinner or you are writing a memo or doing a press release, please do the best that you can.
We'll go back to HP. You said your HP job was not as exciting as GE, and then what happened?
Then I got contacted by Airtel, and which I had no intent of taking up at that time. But then, it was getting me back to Delhi, and it was not through a headhunter.
Right.
Or was it through a headhunter? I don't even remember. I don't think any of my jobs have been through a headhunter.
Right.
Maybe the HP one was, yes. And so I come and I talk to a couple of people. I'd forgotten who I even talked to. I think Sanjay Kapoor or Manoj Kohli or Hemant. One meeting with Sunil.
Right.
I mean, who completely floored me. so I joined them.
Nice.
Not for the faint. I used to head all of communications, which is mobility, broadband, and DTH and enterprise. It's a very large job.
Right.
From 4 people reporting to me, I went to 37 people reporting to me.
Wow.
It was not
Doing
for
circle
the
communication
faint. Exactly.
That, yeah.
It was not for the faint-hearted.
Yeah.
I mean, telecom was one of the most crisis-prone sectors.
Yes.
It really taught me how to think on the feet and, be really agile,
Right.
deal with scale and volume. We used to have 100 press releases a month.
Right.
And also, the environment was pretty complex. So, what it means to manage senior stakeholders, I learned in Airtel.
So after working with 2-3 American kind of companies, so ISBs had a lot of American touch with McKinsey involved. There was GE, HP. How was it working with the Indian homegrown company? Right. What was different?
I remember once somebody who was very smart, actually, one of the executive directors was telling me we have to do it on the 5th. I'm like, why do we have to do it on the 5th? It's a weekday. It was a circle launch, which was something which we used to usually do on Saturdays.
Right.
So he said, you don't know. And I said, no. He said, Sunil's birth number is 5.
Nice.
And we all do all important things on, 5, the days which end in 5.
Nice.
I'm like, okay, I didn't know this. And I laughed. So you can, with just this small anecdote, you can see how different it was.
True.
But at the same time, I would never say that, paint it with a broad brush, that just because it was a desi company, it was inferior. Not in the least.
I'm sure. Then what happened next after Bharti Airtel?
Google sought me out and said that we are setting up the communications function in India. Will you? Apparently, they looked for someone for 2 years and they didn't find, which I didn't quite believe. I had 10 interviews over 8 months.
Wow.
And I had asked for 2 more because I was going to a job a third of its size.
Right.
My job.
Right.
And so I talked to 12 people, and then they sent me flowers once I accepted.
Oh, nice.
So Google is not like any other company. I mean, they deserve every bit of the reputation that they have. Sure. It's the most unique, challenging workplace and a great workplace with a lot of respect, lot of empathy built into it.
I remember meeting you for the first time in your Google office. I reached out to you in 2014 when I came back from my job outside the country, and you invited me, and I loved the whole culture then. We've only read it in books and seen it in some movies, but yeah, we're part of it.
Yeah.
So how does a team in India replicate what Google does in Silicon Valley here? What goes into doing that and getting the same culture?
That's the best part of Google. They don't expect you to replicate everything.
Okay.
That's the best part. That's why Google is so successful.
Okay.
I think they truly empowered the local teams, and we had a lot of headroom and empowerment.
And then from Google, we know the story. Nikesh moved to Softbank. You moved to Softbank.
Yes.
And I don't think that needs much of an explanation. But again, Softbank is a different culture completely. It's a Japanese headquartered company with a big presence in the US, Asia, and many other markets. So how did that, how has that job kind of evolved for you in the last 4.5, 5
It
years?
was
you've been
totally different. Yes, I followed Nikesh because he
Yeah.
was very kind enough to offer me sort of a global job
there? Right,
sitting in India.
right,
But 1 year later, he had to leave,
right,
and it was a bit difficult and uncertain after that. But I decided to stay on because it was still very challenging and there were new things to do, and so it's very different. Uh, SoftBank doesn't really have a country or a region structure.
right,
I have one global boss who sits in New York, a fantastic group of peers uh, based in Tokyo, London, San Francisco, and
Right.
Delhi,
right,
and we work very seamlessly together. I mean, that team, our PR public policy team, is a very good one.
I'm sure,
And then we work directly with managing partners and CEOs.
absolutely.
So there's no air cover, so to
Yeah.
speak, and a lot of complexity because
Absolutely.
private equity is complex. And I also handle the energy business in India.
Right.
That's also quite complex. So
Do you have to also deal with portfolio companies?
portfolio
and their
companies.
issues
So
and
there are
communication
three
needs?
things that we do largely:
Right,
build and protect the SoftBank brand,
right,
do any of the manage the deal pipeline communication, and the third is the portfolio management advisory.
right,
So all three of them can be very challenging in their own ways. The SoftBank job is nothing like what I have done before,
right.
and that's why it's interesting.
I also noticed that SoftBank has been supporting the media rumble for a couple of,
Yes.
how does that dovetail into each other?
Because
Wha-
again, I mean, we always look at sponsorships more as partnerships,
Right,
and I think they do some really good work.
right,
And it's not a platform which attracts a lot of money,
Yeah.
but a lot of attention, both positive and negative. I just think it's a cause of good journalism, and we need to.
absolutely. I remember when you joined SoftBank initially 4 or 5 years ago, you were a very difficult portfolio company founder in housing.com. And he made news almost every day for the wrong reasons and really for the right reasons. So what's your advice for communication professionals who have to deal with such kind of interesting and publicity hungry bosses who are much younger than they are? What do you think is the
it's-
advice you have?
Founders are a different lot.
Right,
Most of them are really brilliant.
yes,
And so I think the trick is to harness that brilliance and make them do things that you want them to.
right,
And I also believe it firmly that if you bring credibility, you get a seat at the table with anyone.
right. So in 2019 or 20, if you were to hire a youngster to be part of your team with 4 or 5 years of experience, what are the few things you look for in that youngster to be part of your team?
I cannot hire someone who's 5 years.
That was
of
more a
experience,
hypothetical question, but yeah. you can-
because this particular job is extremely complex and volatile and global in nature.
right.
So say about 10 to 15, I would think,
Sure.
if I want to hire someone. First, smarts. The ability to gauge an environment, understand your stakeholders, exceedingly important.
Right,
How do you build smarts? Be credible.
right,
Read. My biggest advice to this generation: please read. If you don't read, you don't know.
yeah,
And reading does not mean reading headlines on a device.
right.
Please read. Whether you read a
Yes.
newspaper in a print format or a digital format, who cares?
Right,
Just read.
yeah,
Build knowledge, build information, and that contributes to your credibility. Be confident. What you are suggesting needs to come from a place of confidence.
absolutely.
If someone's confident, it's very difficult to set that person aside.
Right.
Be candid. Your job is to be candid.
So how do you spot someone being a credible person? How do you find that out?
So back to the hiring question. So that
Okay.
person will have to have the smarts.
Right,
And also I put a lot of store by the confidence bit, because if you cannot hold your own, you won't be able to do a job like mine.
right.
Please
Absolutely.
learn to hold your own and learn to manage your stakeholders well. This is not something, I mean, there are other colleagues in the industry, I think, who are much better than me at that. But just like managing external stakeholders, you also need to manage internal stakeholders in a senior job.
Right.
That means understanding cultural nuances and being effective around them.
True.
how I behave in India will not work in Japan,
Right, right.
or how you behave in the US may not work elsewhere. Yeah?
Whenever I meet you, I meet you 3 or 4 times a year, an event or during an evening walk in a neighborhood. I've always seen you to be very calm, but I'm sure you're dealing with multiple storms all the time. So my question is, A, how do you manage to keep calm with all that's going on? Question one. Question two, what do you do to unwind after crazy days of work and multiple travels from Japan to the US to London to India? So how do you keep calm and what do you do to
I
unwind?
don't think I'm calm.
You look
I'm
calm at least.
particularly
You don't
calm.
look hassled. You don't look
But,
frazzled.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think I'm just too old and been around for too long to be faced by crisis.
Right,
Crisis happens, they pass.
right,
And again, I mean, if you're coming from a place of confidence and trust, you can weather a lot of things. And I also that this comes with maturity and age and stage of life. You also have to learn to let go.
Earlier in our chat, you mentioned several bosses who stood out for you in your long career working with them. Tell us one thing you learned from any of your 3 or 4 favorite bosses who stood out for you.
Let's just name the favorite bosses
name
first,
them and then what you learned from them.
Definitely Gary, who is my current boss, Gary
Okay.
Ginsberg, who used to handle PR for Rupert Murdoch. He came for News Corp. Gary is so mature. There isn't anything that he hasn't seen.
Okay.
So his every response is really thoughtful. And he would say, I trust you, you are empowered, go and do what you want. I mean, this level of trust for someone who works for you is pretty unique. I mean, he doesn't ask questions unless and until he absolutely has to.
Right.
Which I mean, we have a very, very good relationship.
Right.
Jessica Powell, the erstwhile head of Google Communications, who gave it all up and now runs her own shop,
Right.
writes and does a startup. I have not met anyone as sort of empathetic as Jessica. She knows 6 languages,
Wow.
an incredibly brilliant person, but she would take care of every team member. I still seek her out to talk
Right.
to. And I mean, if she can, she would meet me every time I go to San Francisco. Very rare to get people like that. And Rachel Wester, our global communications head in Google,
Right.
who's now the chief communication officer at Netflix.
Right.
Rachel is just one of the bravest people I know.
Right.
And from the business side, certainly Rajan, for remaining positive through every situation.
Right.
I mean, Rajan doesn't have a negative day. Even
Right.
if he doesn't show it. His whole attitude is take the best from this situation.
Right.
What is the best that you can do? That's incredible. From Nikesh, the ability to push the envelope. He again was a very difficult and complex boss to have,
Right.
but once you gain his trust, it's for life. And Pramod, despite being so difficult, he really, really taught me the value of resilience.
Right.
So I would say, I've had a lot of Pramod Sinha, very good boss, Sumantra, a lot of people. But these 3 stand out for these 3 things.
Yeah, no, it's helpful because a lot of youngsters sometimes look for role models and they can come from anywhere. They can be your boss, your peer, and they need to find a role model. Sometimes it's no hard and fast rule to find one, but it's always good to have one that helps.
If it's role model, it'll be Rachel.
Okay. You missed answering what does Paroma do to unwind?
Oh, I read. I'm a very prolific reader. I read.
Right.
I read everything that I can get my hands on, even a Cosmopolitan, even if I don't have anything else to read. So I
Right.
read a lot.
Right.
I have a bunch of very like-minded friends who
Right.
don't come from corporates.
Yes.
Writers, filmmakers, journalists are my core group of friends.
Right.
I like to spend time with them as and when I can. Those conversations are very intellectually refreshing, emotionally too. And music, films. I'm a great film buff. I used to be part of a film society in college. The love for movies endure. Art.
Right.
I collect art. So many things. Life is full of possibilities.
And you travel a lot both for work and pleasure as well.
Yeah, we travel
Yeah.
a lot. So yeah,
Yes.
it's not a very easy life.
It is not, yeah.
But I would like to think that I lead a rich life, rich in
Sure.
terms of experiences.
Absolutely. I think it was great talking to you. Before we end, I'm going to do a quick rapid fire with you
Okay.
so that viewers and listeners will get a little more peek into your life and know more about Paroma, who's otherwise low profile yet high power. That's how I'd like to put it. So I have 10 questions for you, and you have 3 seconds to answer each of those questions. The most trusted brand.
Google.
Your favorite book.
There are so many.
One of
Count
them.
of Monte Cristo.
Okay,
Alexander Dumas. Incredible story.
thanks. The best company you've worked for among all the 5 or
Google.
6. Google. Best boss you ever had.
All those people will qualify.
One boss.
That's very difficult to
Fine.
say.
I respect that.
Yeah,
Who's been your professional role model? You already answered that, but
Rachel.
Yeah.
I would say.
An Indian communicator you admire, a peer you admire.
Minari for Amazon does a lot of interesting consumer-facing work,
Right.
which I haven't done,
Right.
and I would have liked to do,
Right.
but I've always been on the corporate side,
Right.
and then finance, tech, telecom. I like some of the stuff Amazon does, and Meenu, because her ability to manage both sets of stakeholders, internal, external, is very good.
Right.
Meenu Honda.
I know. An Indian communication campaign, if there's none in India, then global, that you wish you had worked on.
Some of the Amazon stuff.
Okay.
I think they do really fantastic campaigns facing the consumer,
Okay.
which is not plebeian or commonplace,
Okay.
but very effective. I like Amazon's stuff.
This is very hypothetical. We don't want you to retire, but what if you were to retire next week? What would happen next?
I would write. I would go back to full-time writing,
Okay.
and which I love and which I miss.
Right.
And I'll probably consult a little. I already get a lot of offers to talk to people like this.
Right.
So maybe make something out of that.
Nice.
Consult and write and maybe just travel.
Your preferred holiday destinations, since you said travel, where would you like to spend an entire month holidaying?
Goa.
Goa.
I'm Goan by inclination. So, I like London because my son stays there.
Right.
So Goa and London.
What is the motto you live by?
I
That's
don't
fun.
seize the day.
Nice. Is there
Or
thanks?
seize the moment, I would say.
Thanks
Carpe
for
diem.
answering this rapid fire and the entire time we've had having this conversation. Is there anything else you want to add? Because viewers are going to be youngsters getting into the profession, founders who seek advice on reputation management, people in the profession who are looking for new ways to do better. Is there anything as final comments you would like to add, Paroma?
Credibility, confidence, resilience. My 3 watchwords for a career.
So thank you. It was lovely talking to you, Paroma, and we look forward to similar conversations with others from the Indian communications business in the future as well. Thank you once again for your time. It was great having Paroma Roy Chowdhury, the Asia leader for communications at Softbank. We had a great chat, and I'm sure there's more one can learn from Paroma when you meet her off camera for coffee or just to catch up. And I've had many such interactions in the past as well, and look forward to many more in the future. Thank you for viewing, listening in. We'll have more such communicators in the future. All the best.
Thank you very much for having me again.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Paroma.